What no one tells you about grief. Hi everyone, my name's Miranda. I'm an independent celebrant based in the south of England, and I perform funerals, celebrations of life, weddings, vow renewals, namings, and so much more all over the world. You know, it's Grief Awareness Week this week, so I wanted to pop on here and have a chat about grief. And I think the thing that I've learned through my own grief journey is that grief isn't linear. Grief doesn't have a beginning and an ending. When someone passes and we're grieving, sometimes people will say to me, well, when does the grief end? And it doesn't. Everyone's grief journey looks different. Your journey may begin before your loved one has passed away through circumstances, and years later, you may still be grieving. Grief really became very pivotal in my life, even though I had been through significant losses before. But nearly 14 years ago, my mother passed away very, very suddenly and unexpectedly in an accident. And I was absolutely devastated and thrown into the depths of grief. And for a long time, for the first few months at least, I could barely respond. And the reason why I'm talking about this is that we don't talk about grief, death, and dying enough in our culture. And therefore, it still seems something foreign, mystical, difficult. And of course, it is difficult to deal with. And I do believe, and this is why Grief Awareness Week is so important, I believe that if we talked more about grief, talked more about our own journeys, would make it easier, not to handle the grief, but we would have a greater awareness of what grief looks like and why it looks different for each of us. So in the case of my mum's death, she passed away, and then a few months later, my mother-in-law passed away after a long illness. And then I had several other significant passings, all within the space of about a year. And after 5 months after my mum passed, I was still unable to sleep, dealing with flashbacks, had a lot of death admin that I was dealing with together with my family, and I was not able to really function. And I didn't feel it was fair for me to put all of that burden on my husband, who was also on his own grief journey. And it was actually a family member who said, there's nothing wrong with going and getting some counselling support. It is worth investing in. And there are services that you can access through your doctor that give you grief counselling. In my case, they offered me 6 weeks, which I felt was not enough. And I actually did do some research to find a counsellor that worked for me. I spoke to several counsellors. I went and actually had meetings with a few, and then decided the one that I was going to settle on. And that was my own decision. I didn't just go with the first person that came up on my radar. I wanted to go with someone who thought in a similar way to me in terms of their beliefs and could embrace how I view the world and help me to come to terms with the grief and a lot more. And in my case, I actually ended up having just over a year of counselling, which not only helped me to deal with grief, but it gave me the tools that I still use today, myself, and also share with some of the families that I support as a funeral celebrant, that have really helped me through the toughest of times. I also had a particular type of EMDR therapy to help me to cope with some flashbacks that I was experiencing, and those flashbacks quickly diminished and stopped. And I absolutely wholeheartedly, as a result, recommend counselling, but go with someone that works for you. For me, it was absolutely worth the investment. It cost a lot of money, but I found the means because I was fully invested in helping myself to move forward. And what I learned through that counselling process is that grief isn't linear, like I've said, that my grief journey is going to look different to everyone else's. One of the things that I found very difficult in the initial year after my mum's passing was when grief would hit me, and it came in waves, and it would often hit me whilst I was behind the wheel of a car driving, which isn't exactly safe. I would literally get a huge attack of tears, and I would have to stop the car and compose myself. And the counselling actually helped me to alter when those tears would come so that it was safer. It's so long ago now, I couldn't tell you the specifics behind what we actually did. But what I found was that over time, those moments behind the wheel of the car diminished and were replaced with moments that were a little bit safer. I also found that I felt people were judging me for my grief journey, that because I was handling grief in a very different way to, say, my siblings, my grief was very different. And that's true, but it's not something that we should judge. I'm particularly mindful of this at this time of year in the run up to Christmas, which for those people experiencing Christmas perhaps for the first time without their person is a very difficult time of year. And in my case, I wanted to avoid Christmas. My mum made Christmas magical. It was the best time of year. And so the first year after she'd gone, the first 10 years actually, I hated Christmas. I would avoid it. I would put a Christmas tree up, but really not pay that much attention to it. It was a perfunctory thing. I wanted to avoid anything where it was going to put me in a particularly difficult, sad situation. And I found myself going through the motions just to keep everyone else happy. And then about 4 years ago, something clicked. I can't point to what, but I woke up one day in the run up to Christmas and realized it's time for me to create some new traditions, to do Christmas differently, to enjoy it again. And so now, even though Christmas surrounded by my family who also have their own relationship with my mum and now my dad who's since gone too, I can sit in the midst of that and feel happy again because I know that my parents would want me to be happy again. But I know for others, Christmas is a very difficult time of year. And one thing I will say is if you want to go and hide under a duvet and wake up in January, do it. If you want to go and be around a family and friends and remember that loved one, do it. Do whatever works for you. And don't let what people say you should do or how you feel you're being judged by others sway what you decide to do. Take it at your own pace. Do what you want to do. If you want to ignore Christmas, do it. That year of firsts in particular is very, very difficult, and the subsequent years too, but I found that first year absolutely heartbreaking. So grief looks different for each of us, and we should not judge each other for grieving in our own way. And really, as a funeral celebrant, I'm just there to support you in your journey with empathy and compassion. And I never judge people for how they're feeling. You know, all sorts of feelings come up when you're grieving. Deep, deep sadness, anger. There's also moments of euphoria, and there's guilt that comes because you're still here and they're not, and amongst many other things. And all those feelings are part of a grief journey, which I think should be leaned into and should be honoured and recognised rather than diminished and shut away behind a door with a key and opened only in emergency situations or when you're ready to look at it. Whatever you do to work through grief, do what works for you. I hope that that's been helpful. There will be more videos coming on my role as a funeral celebrant and aspects of death, dying and grieving. But I wanted to make sure that I made this for Grief Awareness Week, especially in the run up to Christmas. And I hope that it has been of some support and comfort. Take care. Bye-bye.